Is it only human curiosity that pushes us to explore uncharted lands? Greed. It is greed that makes people embark on the most dangerous adventures despite fear and common sense. Treasure hunters step into the darkness of the lost temples, and only the dim light of a torch illuminates their path. Perhaps it is the best possible theme for a dungeon crawler, where the roguelite elements with procedural generation creates a unique experience in each run. Today we will talk about the game design of Curse of the Dead Gods, brilliant isometric action RPG which many compare to the last year masterpiece Hades developed by Supergiant Games. And we will try to find the difference between these projects, but most importantly we will answer why the Curse of the Dead Gods is one of the most fair and consistent roguelites ever created. Well, now we have to dive deep into this temple to remove this curse of uncertainty. We will start with the camera perspective, because this isometric view adorns this project so much. This is not accidental, it helps to create game objects in the most favorable quality for aesthetic perception. Here, the required level of details allows you to significantly optimize the art team resources spent, but at the same time it remains at an acceptably high level. If we consider other possible perspective options such as top-down view for instance, it becomes obvious that these projects are more suitable with pixelated or cartoonish visual style. Take the Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon or Crypt of the Necrodancer. As an alternative, we get 3D view projects that are based primarily on the shooter mechanics like Risk of Rain or original Everspace. And finally, if we take a look at classic 2D perspective, then we get entrapped into action platformer limitations, so it is much harder to create and tune complex combat system. Soon, after comparing the various camera view options, it has become clear that isometry got its irrefutable advantages for such projects like Curse of Dead Gods. Just look how well it fits for the similar oppressive atmosphere of the original Diablo. It can be perfectly combined with a hybrid melee plus range-based combat, with waves of enemies attacking at the same time. So let's see what they have got. Speaking of core gameplay, the goal of developers was to create a complex and challenging combat system, based on timings, reaction and game mechanics comprehension. Here you will face a synergy of many game systems, such as various movesets of weapons, enemies, types of damage, interrupting and avoiding mechanics. But the most important element here is the enemy actions queue system. It is designed to provide consistency regardless of amount enemies around. They could attack you according to a strictly defined rules. There are rule sets for action priorities, queues and hidden cooldowns on the enemy attack sequences. This system is focused on a fair gameplay, reducing the impact of RNGs to a minimum. The concept of operation is as follows. Depending on the duration of a particular run, a pool of enemy actions value is formed for each combat event. The further you proceed, the higher this base amount. Each enemy has its own combat behavior metrics, which determines the priorities and relative cost amount for their actions. And so for all enemy roster. Then there are several dice rolls which determine the particular action sequence, so each action relative amount deducted from overall pool value, and all following actions line up in accordance with the dice rolls and priorities. After action sequence takes place, the overall enemy action pool gradually filling back up, so it provides a short pause for starting action determination loop over. I'm not sure it is clear now. Well, at least I was trying to explain basic concept and probably missed some details, but in general, this is how it should work. Now let's see how does it looks for the player. Typical room battle where you meet 2 tough and very dangerous along with the 3 small and annoying enemies. If one of the tough guys starts his attack, it can be accompanied either by an attack of a small one after a short cooldown, or followed by the strike of another big mob, but after a longer pause. Likewise, if small ones attacking together, big boys chilling blankly moving around. Altogether, they can't just tear you apart, you always got the possibility to avoid damage completely. This is the consistency of gameplay. You can find similar features in many projects, and we will discuss these in following videos more thoroughly. But now, let's talk about for what purpose such systems are implemented. Obviously, for the game experience point of view, such combat system excite player not only to improve their skill by learning movesets and timings, but also to scan, prioritize and control combat scene flow, to solve the so-called battle puzzles. And success here lays in both the skill and knowledge. You should learn features of enemy roster, weapon arsenal, damage type effects and positioning schemes. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. In general, combat system is balanced by polishing many different core mechanics and features, so let's look at them closely. I wanna jump to a particular one that become the hallmark of this project, the Corse system. This is a backbone for all elements of his game design without exception. Through the tooltips of Corse effects and weapons, lore distributed to the player, Corses dramatically affect the gameplay and affects the progression, increasing difficulty and adds the significant RNG effect. All these affects the decision-making process. Moreover, there are daily challenge game mode that are based on enhanced unique Corses. Here, the risk and reward increases and grants the new level of emotions by generating fresh gameplay situations. Cursed Weapons took exactly the same principle. It gives unique buffs at the cost of negative quirks that so elegantly fits into the game entourage. And finally, the name of the project speaks for itself, Curse of the Dead Gods. These themes are permeated with every line of code and every pixel. But all these revealed gradually. The fact is that this project got exceptional for roguelite's progression system. Unlike other similar projects, there is no possibility, even hypothetical, to complete the game at the first run. Yes, it is clear that in roguelites, the initial progression is limited by overall complexity, locked perks and skills, unexplored shortcuts and other gameplay restrictions. But in theory, if you call the skill-capped pro, he will be able to beat the credits. In Curse of Dead Gods, that isn't worked that way. Initially, only first sections of each of 3 temples, Snake, Eagle and Jaguar, are available to the player. After completing each section, you are unlocking following, and so on until you get through each temple. Then final part of the game revealing, and this is where the game really begins. Everything that happened before was just a prelude and a rehearsal. Only now curses begin to have a significant impact on the player's decisions. Only now the correct choice of the room order affects the final result. Only now the price of each mistake becomes critical. But let's try to figure out why devs have implemented such progress system. The obvious advantage of this approach is the psychology of the player's victory achievement. In any roguelite project, on initial runs you don't know actually how far you've come and how well you've played. You wiped in a second location, and so what? But here, player is given a specific midterm goal, to complete the few sections of the particular temple, for which he receives a reward and feels the progress clearly. It is the lack of this feeling that often scares players away and they quit particular roguelite. In Curse of the Dead Gods, you are not just haunted by the sense of progress through the conventional tools, like unlocking new perks, weapons and starting item sets. But the game itself provides clear and readable progress distribution. Yes, there is a downside. It is repetitive a bit, however, it is completely diminished by the meta RNG, such as a procedural map and dungeon generation systems, unpredictable enemy behavior, and a large arsenal of weapons. Moreover, it is the weapon system along with the loot drop that implemented to push the player to experiment with new types of weapons and abilities. Loot system here is perfectly tuned. Relics drop infrequently, weapons even more rarely, but at the same time you do not feel lack of a drop and you value each item considering it thoroughly. This is how, in my humble opinion, the loot system of an ideal action RPG should work, and not the huge amount of junk items falling from each pack of mobs, like in Diablo 3 or Path of Exile. It simply turns collecting Earth into a farce, making player to look for a needle in a haystack. But let's get back to our project. Here, player may not prefer one-handed maces, but if you got a rare drop with exceptional abilities, buffs, and which also scales from your offhand, then you should use this rare opportunity, especially if it deals increased damage to champions and bosses. In general, this boss encounters, as you might expect, is one of the most robust and challenging elements of the game. It has everything you need. The variability of movesets, tight timing windows, unique boss features, phase changes, adds and hazards, all performed at the highest level. But the most important goal is to provide player with the proper level of tension and generous reward, both emotional and material, for overcoming worthy challenges. This is the result that Curse of the Dead Gods managed to achieve. Also, I would like to mention the outstanding system of traps and hazards. Each type of temple has its own set of insidious traps, and they not only create additional complexity for combat encounters, but also serve as an excellent tool for mass destruction orchestrating by skilled players. Sometimes it turns out into truly spectacular scenes, the purest fun. So finally, I wanna say that The Curse of the Dead Gods is not just another solid roguelite action RPG, because despite of the frankly weak narrative design, other game disciplines complement each other perfectly. Also, game designers got few aces in their hole: the combat scenes, the enemy behavior system, the polished core mechanics that provide in-depth of the gameplay, rewarding meta progression, and spectacular boss encounters. All these make Curse of the Dead Gods as honest, challenging, and exciting as possible. This project proves that there is still room for bold game design decisions despite the high competition in roguelite genre. Pastech Game Studio did great job. This game design dungeon crawl was pretty exciting, and I hope that you enjoyed it also. And if you like this video, you know what to do. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.